Premier League returns in 2 days. That is all. There is so much going on as clubs attempt to get players signed up before the deadline to be available this weekend. This, ladies and gentlemen, is the Transfer Show. Coming up, Harry Maguire's turbulent 4.5 years at Manchester United are coming to an end. Are United lining up a World Cup winner to replace him? The treble winners, Manchester City, want the Brazil midfielder Lucas Paquetá. Can West Ham afford to lose another key player? And Bayern Munich and Tottenham are still, yes, still, locked in talks over Harry Kane. We've got the latest on the England captain's future. Yes, good evening. Welcome along to the Transfer Show. We have got Mark McAdam, we have got Dharmesh Sheth, and the former Chelsea midfielder and assistant manager, Jody Morris, here to talk us through all the transfers. So, let's start with Harry Maguire, gentlemen. Let's start with you, Dharmesh. Is it close? Really close?
It looks like it is, yeah. West Ham United have an agreement in principle, we're told, with Manchester United to sign their now former captain and their defender, Harry Maguire. It's a deal worth in the region of £30 million. Now, we know they made that bid last week for £30 million. It wasn't accepted or rejected, but talks were continuing over that figure. And we think that West Ham United might have improved the terms and the conditions of that £30 million for Manchester United to now accept. One of the other issues was going to be the personal terms. We're told now that that's not expected to be a problem either. The only obstacle now, if you like, to get this deal over the line is the details of his exit from Manchester United. But I'm told that that should be sorted sooner rather than later. So West Ham now are cautiously optimistic that Harry Maguire will make that move from Manchester United and Old Trafford to West Ham United and the London Stadium.
Jody, good move for Maguire?
I think so. I think he's a proven Premier League player. Does well on the international stage as well. We all know he's had a bit of a troubled couple of years at Man United, obviously losing the captaincy, not being in the team much last year, but I think people are a little bit too quick to write him off. I think he's proved in an England shirt when he's been under a lot of pressure. I think he's performed really well, and I hope it goes well for him because, like I said, I think he's got a little bit of equity in the bank, if you like, with the years that he spent at Leicester and Hull, and even when he first went to Man United, I thought he performed really well. So I'm pleased for him if it's the move that he wants.
Mark, that's a key point, if it's the move he wants, because it's all very well, the clubs can make a deal. Harry Maguire might say, I want to stay. I think I can get in the Man United first team. Is that a possibility?
I don't think that's a possibility. I think Erik ten Hag has been quite fair and respectful to Harry Maguire and said, look, you're not going to feature heavily for me. But if you want to stay and fight for your place, that's absolutely fine. But my best advice would be go and play. And that would have been ringing in his ears because Gareth Southgate has made it quite clear privately to every single England player that's on the fringes of their first team. Last season, I'll pick you because the summer's not important. We've only got a couple of qualifiers against Malta and North Macedonia. Next summer is where the business happens. It's the Euros. And if you're not playing regular first-team football, then you won't be going. There's no guarantees. And you've seen Gareth Southgate so many times stand by players, support players, and always give them the benefit of the doubt and always judge them on how they've been essentially for England, not just their clubs. But I think this is one season where he won't be able to kind of be in that position where they're just getting the benefit of the doubt. You need to play first-team games and you need to be playing competitive football in a good league. Otherwise, your chances of going to the Euros next summer are going to wane away.
But Jody, you've been on coaching staffs. Don't you want to hear a player say, no, I'm staying and I'm fighting. I want to get back into the side. Isn't that music to a manager's ears?
It can be, but then if you're a manager that kind of, you don't really see the future with him in it, and ideally you don't want someone of maybe the profile, the fact that he was captain of the club, maybe still there. I mean, I'd like to think, and whenever an opportunities arose for Harry Maguire to show good professionalism, I think he's always done that. One thing I think you always have to hand it to him with is that he's never shied away from a challenge. He always wants to get on the ball, even when he's making mistakes in games. The fact that he's a ball-playing centre-half, he never shies away taking the ball, and I think he sticks his chest out and tries to lead from the front. It hasn't always gone his way, but I think it's probably best for all parties. The minute you're being left out, I think you do need to look at what your options are, and if West Ham is the option that he wants to take, then fair play to him.
The issue that he had last season was Erik ten Hag made that decision that Lisandro Martinez, a player that he brought into the club, and Rafael Varane, a World Cup winner, were going to be his first choice centre-backs. Now, there's one thing being the first choice centre-backs, but then you'd want to be the first cab on the rank if one of those are injured. Yeah. And they both have had their injury problems, but what transpired was Victor Lindelof was ahead of him. Luke Shaw, who was a left-back, he decided to play him when...
See, that's got to hurt, hasn't it, when you play someone out of position ahead of you?
It would have done, but I think it just illustrates how Erik ten Hag wants his team to play. And he probably thought that Luke Shaw was more of a like-for-like replacement for someone like Lisandro Martinez than Harry Maguire would have been, with the taking the ball from the back and the way that he wanted to play. So if you're in a position where you're going to be fourth or fifth choice, I think the decision ends up being made for you. And then in the summer, when there's a much publicised deposition as captain as well, with Bruno Fernandes, who's the captain at the club. So all of those ingredients put together, it was probably the best move for Harry Maguire.
OK, so let's say Maguire does go. There's been talk of Benjamin Pavard coming in, Mark. Is he the only one that United are looking at?
No, so Pavard is probably the name at the top of the list, but we know that Manchester United have been doing their due diligence on a number of potential replacements should that deal get confirmed with regards to Harry Maguire. The situation with Pavard, 27 years old, obviously an international as well. Significantly, he's going into the last year of his current contract at Bayern Munich, who he joined in 2019. So you know that when players get into that last year, the deal becomes a little bit cheaper, and perhaps Manchester United will be looking at this thinking he's a player with good experience at the highest level that could come into the football club. He's predominantly a right-back, but he has played at centre-half as well, so he does bring that versatility, which is something we're talking about with regards to so many players at the moment. And Mike, one other player as well that Manchester United's camp have made contact with are the team surrounding Jean-Claire Todibo, who's a 23-year-old. He was at Barcelona, joined them in January 2019. He's had a few loan spells, Schalke, Benfica and Nice, and then joined Nice last summer for €8.5 million. He's another player that is sort of on the list for Manchester United. But as Darmesh has said over the last few days, Manchester United's bulk of their transfer activity has been done. However, the good news for United fans, they're being proactive. Should they start to lose players, they've got lists that they're ready to action.
So just on Pavard, just very, very quickly, Manchester City were interested in him as well earlier on in this transfer window. Kyle Walker looked like he was going to go to Bayern Munich, and Pavard looked like he was one of the primary targets. But they've since, I'm sure we'll talk about later, since said, well, Kyle Walker, we want to offer him a new contract. But it hasn't changed Pavard's attitude that he wants to leave, being in the final year of his deal. So Manchester United could benefit from the fact that Kyle Walker stays at Manchester City.
Mark mentioned that the bulk of United's business has been done. Given that's the case, are they getting themselves into a position to challenge for the title?
I think if you're a United fan, you're hoping that they are. I personally don't see them maybe challenging as strong as like an Arsenal would. But I certainly think that they're improving. I think we said last week on the show that the fact that they've maybe replaced Weghorst, I think they're a little bit more mobile now in what could be the 9 position. Would they want maybe a bit more of an experienced Premier League player to lead the line? Maybe like Harry Kane? I think so. If you're a United fan, you probably want maybe a little bit more of an established 9. But if you hit the ground running as a new club and you start well, then there'll be no one making any complaints. But I certainly think that they're improving, Man United.
Now, Mark, for those people who weren't with us at 5 o'clock, you broke some news concerning Max Aarons. We don't often get to say the word, but gazumped. Tell us what happened.
Gazumped, I like that. Hijack is another word. So we had the news first thing this morning that Norwich City and Leeds had agreed a deal for the 23-year-old right-back. He's one of those players that you think, well, he's only 23 years old because he broke into the first team and was playing Premier League football so young. But he'd gone into the last year of his current deal, and Norwich City were looking at him thinking, this is an opportunity for us to just recoup a little bit of money for a player that came through our system. He was headed up to Leeds. He was at Leeds today. They'd agreed a deal with Norwich, but one of these magical transfer moments. Bournemouth have got in contact with the agent at the right time. They've agreed a deal with Norwich City, which we understand to be £7 million with £3.5 million in add-ons. So it could be a total package of £10.5 million. And then there's that moment where Max Aarons is at the club at Leeds, and then he's got to find a way to start heading down south for a Bournemouth medical. So, of course, it's the lure of the Premier League.
How does he do that? Does he say, I'm just popping to the loo and then run for his car? How does that work?
Do you know something? That will be my number one question to Max Aarons at the first opportunity I get the chance to speak to him. Of course, he's still got to pass his Bournemouth medical. He's still got to sign the paperwork and get everything confirmed. But it certainly looks like he's heading in that direction.
Smart business, Jody, or a bit naughty from Bournemouth?
No, smart business. Listen, until anything's signed and the ink is dry, then nothing's done. I had my own experience of that. I thought at one point when I was leaving Chelsea, I was signing for Blackburn. That fell away, and it got to the point where the new season was started, and I was halfway through a medical at Cardiff with Sam Haman, and I was doing one part of the medical on one day, and then the next morning finishing it off and doing a press conference. And obviously Cardiff were in the Championship at that time, and my phone rang from the hotel room. I was about to go for dinner with Sam Haman, and Peter Reid rang me from Leeds and said, I thought you were signing for Blackburn. And I went, no, I'm not, but I'm going to end up signing for Cardiff. I'm halfway through a medical. He went, get yourself in the car and get up to Yorkshire. We'll take you at Leeds. And obviously staying in the Premier League was a huge thing for me, and I imagine it's something similar of how Max Aarons is feeling. I mean,
did you say anything to Sam Hammam?
Yeah, rang him straight away. No, he was really good to me in that day that we was spending most of the day together, wanted to take me out. So I rang him straight away, and I didn't shy away from what it was. It was an opportunity to stay in the Premier League and moved to a huge club like Leeds, and the rest was history.
That's a great story. Let's talk Arsenal, Dharmesh, and the goalkeeping situation. How close is Raya to becoming an Arsenal player?
We think very close now. Arsenal expected to finalise a deal for the Brentford goalkeeper. He's entered the final year of his contract at Brentford, we know. Didn't want to sign a new contract, so it's in the interest of all parties to try and get this deal done. And we think that Arsenal have been working on a compromise on the fee throughout the last week or so. We knew from the outset of this transfer window that Thomas Frank has been, really bigging up David Raya by saying he's one of the top 4 goalkeepers in the Premier League, so he's worth around £40 million. I don't think Arsenal wanted to pay that much simply because he's entered the final year of his deal. So I think they've made a compromise with a guaranteed payment of around £30 million. So I think everyone will probably be quite satisfied with that deal. He's a long-term admirer of Raya, is Mikel Arteta. He's tried to sign him before, but failed. Looks like this time it is going to happen. And people will ask the question, we asked Brad Friedel as well, it's 2 number 1s now effectively at Arsenal. David Raya potentially and Aaron Ramsdale. What does that mean for Aaron Ramsdale? I think Mikel Arteta's ambition is such that he wants strong competition in every single position, so they get to a point where no one is guaranteed their place. So it's going to be a fight between Raya and Ramsdale. Now, the reason that they've gone for this goalkeeper is probably they thought the competition for Ramsdale wasn't as high as they wanted it to be. Matt Turner, yes, US international goalkeeper, but he's now joined Nottingham Forest on a 4-year deal. It's a deal worth £10 million. It was announced earlier on this morning. Forest will pay Arsenal £7 million in an initial payment, plus £3 million in performance-related add-ons. And the quirk of the fixture computer would have it 12:30 on Saturday, Arsenal against Nottingham Forest. Matt Turner could well be playing his first game for Forest at the Emirates against his former club.
Jody, Ramsdale and Raya in the same squad. Could there be trouble ahead?
Well, it depends who gets the number 2 spot. It's trouble for them, really, isn't it? I think it's a great signing if you can add someone of that quality to your squad. It could spell trouble for Ramsdale. We're not going to sit here and beat around the bush. It could spell trouble because when you're signing a keeper, like the lads have already said, of that quality, and rightly so, Thomas Frank has tried to get the best price for his player because he knows how good and what his value was to Brentford. I think it's a really good signing, but it could pose trouble for the competition side of things if you're a Ramsdale.
Sometimes these clubs have a cup keeper and a league keeper, don't they? I don't know whether that works, but I mean, I'm looking at West Ham United last season.
Yeah.
Last couple of seasons, actually.
Yeah, and City.
Fabianski in goal for the Premier League, and Alphonse Areola was in goal for every single cup game. Ended up winning the Conference League.
There's still
I think
we'd
we'd all think that the person that is starting in the Premier League is the number one, though.
But the thing for Arsenal is they're in the Champions League. So, you know, when you look at their season, they're probably going to play 55, 56 games and 38 in the Premier League. You're still going to get 20 starts if you're the number 2 in the Champions League.
No,
in the FA
the
Cup.
number 1 will play Premier League and Champions League, won't they? Like City.
But the thing is,
Ederson plays those competitions and Ortega plays the others.
When you've got 2 really good number 1s, or essentially is what Arsenal would have, I think Mikel Arteta will be comfortable playing either in either competition, and it gives them that versatility.
I do think they're both good enough, but I still think that whoever ends up on the wrong side of that...
like Mike said, there may be trouble ahead.
There may be trouble ahead. I'm not going to burst into song, but I am going to take us to a break. Coming up next, we'll talk about Manchester City, the treble winners. Are they about to spend big again? They just might be. That's coming up next in a moment. Hello again, this is the Transfer Show. It's taken a while, but we are going to talk Manchester City, the treble winners. What about their business, and are they going to spend a lot of money again? Looks like they might. Dharmesh, tell us.
Yeah, this is a really interesting one. We started the show talking about a positive story for West Ham United, agreeing a deal with Manchester United for Harry Maguire, but a bit of bad news now because West Ham United have received an initial approach from the treble champions, Manchester City, for Lucas Paquetá. They've already sold Declan Rice in this transfer window. Lucas Paquetá is now the subject of really, really strong interest from Manchester City. We're told that what was verbally proposed to West Ham United by Manchester City was in no way deemed acceptable. That's the phrase that I was given. So there was no formal bid, but it was probably what Manchester City approaching West Ham United and said, this is what we probably would be prepared to pay for Lucas Paquetá. It's thought that West Ham United will not even begin to consider any kind of sale for Lucas Paquetá unless they're starting to talk about figures of £85 million plus. We don't think Manchester City got anywhere near that with their verbal proposal for Lucas Paquetá. But it should also be said, look, he's still under contract, 4 years to go. West Ham have got no intention of selling him, and they do not want to sell Lucas Paquetá for obvious reasons. A fantastic player, particularly the last 3 months of last season. However, what could be going against West Ham United in this one is, and it's not surprising to hear, we think that Paquetá's head has been turned by Manchester City's interest in him. So this is one with, just a little over 20 days to go that I think we're going to continue to talk about for the rest of this transfer window, because once Manchester City start going for a player, it's very difficult for a player to say no, to play under Pep Guardiola, to play for the treble champions, to play in the Champions League as well. So Manchester City are looking at Lucas Paquetá and look like they're serious about him.
He only joined West Ham this time last year for £51 million. And interestingly as well, he has a release clause in his current West Ham deal, but only kicks in next summer, and that's for £85 million.
How do you deal with a player whose head has been turned?
Well, I think you need to, first and foremost, get a face-to-face with him, find out, is it him that's driving it, is it the agent, is it talk from the media, you guys. And essentially you need to look him in his eyes and see if he's dead set on getting out of the club, because as much as you want to keep your best players and the ones that are clearly going to add value to your team or your starting lineups, but you also, me personally as a manager or a coach, I wouldn't want people that are around the club that literally don't want to be there. And if they're going to spend, like Dharmesh says, the next 20 days or so doing their utmost to get out, then I think that there needs to be a bit of a, OK, let's come to an agreement here, because, like I said, I think sometimes getting players out at the right time is just as important as getting the players through the door.
They'll need clarity as well. David Moyes, if the club is going to accept a bid, he doesn't want this going into the last week, because he'll have, for example, if they're going to accept something like £85-90 million, they won't have any time to spend that £85-90 million. But they've got building up a lot of money.
I was going to say, they've got all this money sloshing around, and there's going to be a West Ham tax, isn't there? Because everyone will say, well, you know, you've got to spend it.
Especially the later it goes. Especially the later it goes.
But also, because West Ham done well with the money that they got on board from Declan, they'll be saying, well, hold on a minute, we held out and got the right amount for the club in the previous deal. Let's do the same, whether it works out that way or not.
Do you see why City want the player?
Yeah, I mean, I think he's a good player. I mean, me personally, I was quite surprised with the figures and the fact that it was Manchester City. But like Dharmesh and Mark saying, if Manchester City and Pep Guardiola come talking, you can absolutely understand why players' heads are turned.
OK, let's talk Edson Alvarez. We were saying for many days now this is going to happen. It's not happened. What's going on?
Yeah, look, back to the positives for West Ham United. He will sign a 5-year contract. It will come with an option for a further 12 months. He's completed his medical. We think we're at the final stages of that deal, the paperwork stage, as it were, the formalising of the contract, etc. West Ham, just a reminder of the deal, will pay Ajax an initial £32 million plus a further £2 million in performance-related add-ons. This one looks like it's when and not if Edson Alvarez swaps Ajax for West Ham United.
OK, so it looks like they're going to get their mark. Are they going to get James Ward-Prowse?
Yeah, this is another deal that is edging closer now. We understand that West Ham and Southampton have a broad agreement with regards to a deal for James Ward-Prowse. Their initial offer around £20 million was rejected. Their second offer at £30 million was rejected. But this third offer of £30 million as well has been accepted in principle, and it's our understanding that it's because the structure of the deal has changed. Now, we don't know the details of the structure. It could be more money up front with less add-ons and so on and so forth, but finally there has been a breakthrough. So this will be music to the ears of David Moyes, who has always been a long-term admirer of James Ward-Prowse. Of course, made his debut for Southampton 12 years ago in August 2011 in the League Cup. 28 years old, England international. We're not expecting the personals to be a problem, even though he is the highest paid player at Southampton. 400 appearances for the Saints. Quite a remarkable story for a young lad that's been on the South Coast for his whole career, come through the system there. And you'd imagine that this will be a tough one for him. He wants to play Premier League football. He wants to be in Gareth Southgate's thinking for next summer in the Euros. But of course, that doesn't mean playing Championship football. Our latest information is that James Ward-Prowse won't play this weekend in Southampton's match down on the South Coast against Norwich. He'd love to play, but it's not going to happen. So the final farewell is not going to happen. He's going to have to say his goodbyes on social media, but only a matter of time now before he heads to East London.
Just very, very quickly, just staying with West Ham, we remember that when they made the £30 million bid for Harry Maguire, they also made a £30 million bid for Scott McTominay as well. He was one of their primary targets. They haven't as yet gone back in with an improved offer to Manchester United. The information we were getting was with the Maguire deal, it was much closer to what Manchester United were looking for, whereas the gap in the valuation between what United wanted and what West Ham were prepared to pay for Scott McTominay was quite large, hence why they refocused their attention to James Ward-Prowse. And as it stands, we think that Scott McTominay will remain at Manchester United unless a bigger offer does come in, which they would consider. But it should be said, they're not pushing McTominay out of the club. They still see him as a key member of that squad. And it's only if a fair market value offer was to come in that they would even begin to consider it.
OK, so Alvarez and Ward-Prowse close then for West Ham. Is that spending the Declan Rice money wisely?
I think so. I mean, obviously, I don't know as much about Alvarez with his time at Ajax, but I think if you're looking at consistency over the last 10, 11 years, as a midfielder, I think there's not many that has performed for that amount of time consistently well like James Ward-Prowse has. I know that he's been involved in a team that is maybe the pressure is not for them to be winning things or pushing higher up the table, but he's certainly never ever lowered his standards whenever Southampton have been in relegation battles or struggling. I think one of the players that has always stood up and produced has been James Ward-Prowse. I think it's an intelligent signing from West Ham, and when you look what he can offer from a set-piece aspect, I'm sure David Moyes is licking his lips.
Would he have played for England more if he'd played at a more glamorous club, do you think?
Maybe. I mean, I know that's an argument that can easily be chucked out when you're maybe not at the sort of the so-called top 6 or 8 clubs. But even when he played for England, I thought he performed well as well. I think he's a type of player that you can slot him into many different teams, and I think he'll perform to the level that he's capable of. And like I said, a little change of scenery might be obviously a little bit different for him, spending so long at Southampton, but I think it could be a real good move for him, and I think he'll do well there.
OK, that's one England player who could be on his way back to the Premier League. And Mark, another one on the way back to the Premier League. This one caught us all on the hop. Ross Barkley, tell us.
Yeah, this is brilliant. You know, not very often in modern transfer news do you keep these things under wraps, but Luton Town...
I bet Jody knew.
Jody knew.
What, that he was going to Luton? No.
Oh,
absolutely didn't. No.
Yeah, so it was announced this afternoon, caught everyone out, and that's brilliant because we like to see these surprises every now and then because they don't happen very often. 29 years old, so he's still got a lot of football ahead of him, of course. 33 England caps, played in the World Cup 9 years ago in 2014, 232 Premier League appearances, 29 goals, 28 assists in the top flight in this country. So when you look at Rob Edwards looking for experience and know-how and a bit of creativity in the final third, Ross Barkley will absolutely bring that. So, that's a free transfer as well, subject to international clearance. He's left Ligue 1, where he'd been playing last season, and he will go into that Luton setup. And I'm guessing, Jody, someone that you actually know quite well from your Chelsea days.
Yeah, extremely talented lad. You'd have to say you probably would have wanted him to have played a bit more football the last few years. Hasn't played as much as he would have liked, but as Mark quite rightly said, he's only 29 years of age. Good, powerful, strong lad, technically gifted, and I think he'll be an asset to Luton for sure, with the fact that he's got Premier League experience. And I think Luton at times this year are going to have to find that little bit of magic, that real little bit of quality that it can open up defences. And I think Ross has got that both from a scoring aspect. I think he can score extremely difficult, technically difficult goals, but I also think he can see a pass that not many can. So I think it's a good move for everybody, and Ross just needs to play because he's hugely talented, and I think the minute he starts getting up and running and getting a run of games together, he'll show people again in the Premier League what he's capable of.
Right, I'm hearing, Dharmesh, you've got some breaking news for us. What have you got?
Yeah, this is a development on the David Raya situation, and it's been broken exclusively by one of our colleagues, David Ornstein. Now, it's just been confirmed to me that this is going to be the deal with regard to Arsenal and Brentford. It's a very, very interesting one as well, because we told you that Raya had entered the final year of his contract at Brentford. He's actually extended his contract at Brentford by a further season. Now, bear with me. Arsenal will now take him on loan for a loan fee for the season of around £3 million, with the option to buy David Raya at the end of that loan for £27 million. Now, if Arsenal don't take up that option of £27 million come next summer, Brentford are protected because they've extended Raya's contract by a further season. Hence, they will still be able to get a transfer fee for him if he goes back into the market this time next summer. It looks like it's a good deal for all parties because Arsenal will get a number one goalkeeper from Brentford who will fight for Aaron Ramsdale and compete for Aaron Ramsdale for that number one position. And Brentford will get a loan fee for now and the prospect of getting £27 million if Arsenal exercise that option, but will get Raya back and be able to sell him for a price that they can dictate next summer if Arsenal don't take up that option. With regard to the timetable of the move, we expect him to have a medical this week and the whole move to be tied up within the next 48 hours.
Right, I need someone to explain this to me because I'm confused. Jody, why didn't Arsenal just buy him? Why are they taking him on loan?
Well, like I said before, I think Brentford are an extremely well-run club, have been now for a good few years, and they've got a top manager in place that they want to make sure they protect themselves. OK, signing a new deal might look quite a lot on paper, but it will just mean that Arsenal are going to cover whatever new wages he's moved on to. So there's no wages that they'll be handing out for the player. And then, like I said, if they like what they see and they want to make it a permanent one, that deal's still there, as well as Brentford still there, knowing that they have an asset in a goalkeeper that if things don't go to plan and Raya wants to come back, then Brentford are still in pole position.
Arsenal kind of held the cards in this one a little bit, only because Brentford had already brought in a new number one goalkeeper and Raya had entered the final year of his contract and had made it clear he wasn't going to sign a new contract and wanted to leave. So they had to come up with a deal that if Arsenal didn't go all out and buy him on a permanent basis, they could do something that would work for all parties. So this one works for Raya, it works for Arsenal, and it works for Brentford because they still will have the opportunity to sell him if Arsenal don't take up that option. They'll effectively be in the same position they are now next summer if Arsenal don't exercise the £27 million option.
Gotcha. All right, let's take a break. That is now less confusing. When we come back, we're going to talk Chelsea with Jody. He only comes on if we talk Chelsea, trust me. Are they any closer to getting a midfielder? Plus, of course, we're going to talk Harry Kane. See you in a moment. Welcome back. We've got breaking news. It is the transfer show after all. Dharmesh.
Yeah, good news for West Ham United. In the past few minutes, it's just been confirmed to me that, I'll read it word by word here, everything is done with JWP, James Ward-Prowse. So we have an agreement between West Ham United and Southampton. We have an agreement, we think, on personal terms for James Ward-Prowse as well. It's a £30 million deal. As Mark was explaining before the break, it breaks down into a £30 million deal, but the conditions and the payment structure was more favourable for Southampton after it had been rejected, that amount, last month. So that's the deal that is in place now for West Ham United. It's a case of when and not if now that James Ward-Prowse, we think, will become a West Ham United player. Timetable-wise, we think he will start his medical tomorrow. That will go into Friday as well. I'm told it is touch and go whether he will be registered in time to be available against Bournemouth for the Premier League opener on Saturday. Remember, they have to have this deal done and registered by midday on Friday for him to be available for the Premier League opener on Saturday. But all systems go now, it seems, for West Ham United's move for James Ward-Prowse. It is agreed between the clubs, the £30 million deal. Personal terms, we think, are agreed as well. Medical will start tomorrow, go into Friday. Touch and go whether he'll be registered by Friday midday.
Excellent. Breaking news on James Ward-Prowse. Jodie, are we going to get some breaking news on Harry Kane? They're still talking. They've been talking and talking and talking. I've asked everyone this today, so I'm going to ask it to you. What on earth can they still be talking about?
Well, the amount of money that Daniel Levy wants for Spurs. I think he's got a proven track record when you're talking about world-class players, which Harry Kane most certainly is. He squeezes until it's dry. He gets the most amount of money in for his club, and I don't think you can knock him for that. Obviously, if Harry is wanting the move, and like we've read and spoke about on here, that he'd like it sewn up before the first game of the season, or he's just going to play on at Spurs. But listen, it looks like Bayern Munich are up in it again, and it's a world-class club with a world-class manager trying to acquire a world-class striker, and I think sometimes when you get to that level it can take a little bit longer.
Are we all forgetting Harry Kane amongst this? Because Paul Gilmore was on a bit earlier and he said Kane is leaning towards staying. Does that not work for anybody if that happens?
I don't know. I think it could work for Kane. At the end of the day, if he wants to stay, then I think that does work for Kane. He gets to play out his last year of his contract. In that time, will Spurs then think that they can maybe persuade him to sign for longer? If he does or he doesn't, who knows? But you then get to the end of your contract, and then I think Kane's got a lot more options on the table. I think the general consensus is that Spurs won't sell to a Premier League club. So obviously, if he sees out his contract, then I think he's going to have more options. Which I think we all know that if money wasn't an object, and if staying in the Premier League maybe doesn't suit Tottenham's plans, then I think that there'd be a whole host of leading clubs in Europe for sure that are trying to acquire Harry Kane services. So who knows? If he wants to stay, for me, and he wants to honour his contract, then that's entirely up to Harry, and he certainly earned the right to make whatever decision suits him and his family.
Martin Samley in The Times wrote an article, Mark, today saying that why would Spurs sell Harry Kane? He's worth much more than the, whatever it is, 94 point whatever million that Bayern Munich are going to pay. He's worth much more than that to Spurs. So why would they sell him? Has he got a point?
Yeah, he's got a brilliant point because, you know, ultimately football comes first, but very closely followed is finances, because every decision that gets made is about money. Now, without Harry Kane, I think most people would agree that Tottenham would struggle to get in the top four this season, top five potentially for the Champions League placings. Now, being in the Champions League is worth a minimum of £60 million. You go and win the competition, as Chelsea did a few years ago, it was worth about £120 million in that revenue alone. So when you kind of balance that out, Harry Kane, chance of getting into the Champions League, that's worth £60 million, plus it buys us 12 months to potentially try and encourage him to sign a new contract. Actually, we'd rather have him at the club, or they take the money, and then say goodbye to Champions League football. Now, Ange Postecoglou would turn around and say, hang on, Mark, no, I'll get this team in the top 4. I'll build a squad that's capable of competing and challenging. I've got players that can come in and build something new and special here in a brand new era. I'll get this team into the top 4 with or without Harry Kane. But that would be, on paper, that, you know, essentially what Martin Samuel will be saying is that he's worth so much in that respect that actually you shouldn't be selling him.
Okay, it's got to, what, 7:43, Jody? We're going to talk Chelsea. Reece James, captain, what do you make of that?
I'm delighted for him. I'm delighted for him, not just for him as a person, but as Chelsea fans. I think there's nothing better than seeing a homegrown player walk out onto the pitch and play for the club that he's been at all his life. And one step better than that is to be able to lead out the team in the Premier League as a homegrown player. And yeah, I'm delighted for him. Listen, I think most people were thinking, is it going to be Thiago Silva or Reece James? And it looks like Reece has got the nod, and I'm pleased with it because I think he's one of the best players at the club, an England international, and I think he'll enjoy the extra responsibility. I made him captain in my FA Youth Cup days. Funny enough, the 2 years that I was in charge, I had Mason Mount the first year and Reece James the second year, so I was pretty lucky with that. But yeah, and I felt that Reece led by example. I think we've already seen Pochettino's quote saying that he does that, and I think he'll continue to do so. And I think it's the extra responsibility that he needs to maybe just push on that little extra yard and staying fit. You've got a world-class player there.
Yeah. Darmish, will he get to captain Moises Caicedo next season?
Oh, good question. Chelsea are still pushing, but they're still considering what their next step is going to be with regard to the pursuit of the Brighton midfielder and the Leeds United midfielder Tyler Adams as well. Brighton say Caicedo's valuation has not been met, but this is a subtle difference to what happened in January and what's happening now. In January, it was not for sale. That was the mantra coming out of Brighton. Now it's no one's met the valuation. It's not for sale. I think what Brighton are saying is they don't need to sell. They've got no intention of selling, but there is a valuation this time. And if Chelsea can meet it, which we think is in the region of £100 million, then maybe a deal can still be done. We expect Chelsea to go back in with an improved offer. They had an £80 million bid rejected, the last of 3 or 4 bids in this summer's transfer window. And we think that Caicedo has made it clear to Brighton that he wants to make the move to Chelsea. As far as Tyler Adams is concerned, he's got a £20 million release clause. But Chelsea are deciding whether just to give Leeds the £20 million or try and do a structured deal where they might pay Leeds United a little bit more, but pay it over a more structured period and maybe a more lengthy period, rather like they did with Villarreal and Nicholas Jackson. So 2 midfielders they want to bring in. It looks like the primary targets are Caicedo and Adams.
I'm being told we've got to go to a break. Don't worry, we're going to talk more Chelsea after it and get your view on those transfer targets. Back in just a couple of moments. We'll see you. Hello again. We were going to talk Chelsea's transfer business. Jody, we were talking Tyler Adams and Moises Caicedo. Do you get Tyler Adams to Chelsea?
I was a little bit surprised, to be honest, to be reading it. I kind of get the Caicedo, and I think he's going to elevate the team and be huge to what they're trying to do in midfield. The Tyler Adams one, I wasn't too sure about. Put it this way, it surprised me. But again, listen, there's plenty of people that are in recruitment and that are getting the right sort of data on players and trying to do their due diligence on players. If he comes through the door and plays well, then it's a good sign, and then looks in today's market quite cheap.
Does Caicedo work on all sorts of levels for you?
Yeah, I think you've got someone that's already played to an extremely high level in the Premier League. I think he's the type of midfielder that the manager is looking for and that we need, and also can fill in other positions. And when you look at the age of the player, of being only 21,
which people forget.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, listen, I do know that we've been buying a lot of youngsters. I think that's the mantra at the minute, coming through the door. But he is certainly one where the fact that you've seen him perform at such a high level in the Premier League, you do look at that one and go, if there needs to be a bit of an extra premium on that, you kind of see it.
Jody, are you surprised at the philosophy in the transfer window to go and buy young players when, for the last 5 years, we've seen Chelsea produce so many great young players through their academy?
Yeah, I mean, obviously I'm always going to lean towards being a homegrown player myself and having worked in what I believe to be one of the best academies in the world. Of course, I'm going to be surprised at that, knowing the quality that goes on behind the scenes. But I think if some of these players that they have signed that are such at a young age, if they develop into world beaters, it could be nicely entwined with, hopefully, not just ignoring the academy, but hopefully trying to bring them along as well. Listen, they might feel that there wasn't quite ones that were ready to step in. I mean, we was lucky enough that we kind of knew the players that were behind the scenes, and we knew their qualities from working closely with them. The previous management or the management that is in there now, they might not know as well as we did what was behind the scenes. So, listen, I just hope that they do take a look at what that academy is doing, because they're, for me, a world-class academy.
Given last season, what would be a successful season for Chelsea be this time?
I think that's a difficult question to answer because of what a poor season we had. But knowing all the problems that's gone on behind the scenes, with obviously the squad being too big, it looks like we've made some progress as far as getting some real decent young players through the door that, have to say, in pre-season they've been looking very good. The fact that we've got a permanent manager in, someone who I believe in, I think his style of management and what he demands of the players, I think will rub off well, especially on the younger players. I think a good season will certainly be, as Chelsea fans, we're looking at the top four. I think there's no other way to look at it, that we should be looking at Champions League football. If we do play better, if we improve and we kind of challenge for it and maybe miss out, it still might be viewed as a success. But obviously we know the level of what Chelsea has been performing at for so long, and I think the main thing that everyone's been looking for is top four, and Pochettino will want to win something.
I bet he will. Dharmesh, we've only got a minute or so, so just recap the David Raya news, which is significant.
Interesting. It's been confirmed to us, the Athletic story from David Ornstein and Jay Harris in the past hour, that Brentford have actually extended David Raya's contract by a further season. He was into the final year of his contract, but Arsenal hope to complete the deal to sign David Raya in the next 48 hours. And how it's going to work is Arsenal will take him on loan initially for a loan fee of £3 million and have the option to buy at the end of that season for £27 million. People will ask, well, why are they doing it that way? Well, it works for all parties, actually, because Arsenal get competition for goalkeepers and they get to pay Brentford a loan fee, but then Brentford, if they don't take up the option, they will have a rival.
Music means we've got to go. Thank you all. Sky Sports News is next.